Good morning, everyone. I think what you heard inside is what us and our colleagues across the country have been saying now since day one of this administration. 157 years ago, we came together as a nation post-Civil War and said never again were we going to debate whether babies born on American soil are entitled to the rights and privileges of American citizenship. And contrary to what the United States is saying, citizenship doesn't turn on or turn off when you cross state lines. Babies born in Philadelphia are subject to the same rights and privileges as babies born in New Jersey. And I have to say, it was astonishing to hear the United States government tell the 9 justices of the Supreme Court that they weren't sure whether they would follow binding court precedent. They weren't sure if they could concede that basic fact that is the underpinning of the rule of law in this nation. This case is about birthright citizenship, but it's about whether the rule of law and the constraints on the executive, and as Justice Jackson said, whether the president can act like a king. The answer I think the court is going to say is no, he cannot. I'm proud to join my colleagues. I'm very proud of our Solicitor General, Jeremy Feigenbaum, for the work he did inside, and I look forward to the court's opinion in this case. I'll turn it over to Attorney General Nick Brown from the state of Washington.
Good afternoon, and thank you, AG Platkin. I'm incredibly proud of the team effort that led to this moment today and the work that we have moving forward. The unfortunate reality that we are facing now in America is that it is incumbent upon attorney generals to stand up and protect Americans from their president. Because time and time again, this president is acting unlawfully in violation of the Constitution, and we cannot address a more fundamental issue than the one the court is beginning to address today, than what it means to be an American in the United States. And all of the precedent is on the side of the state actors here. Time and time again, the Supreme Court has weighed in on this and affirmed that if you were born in the United States, that you are a citizen. That is backed up by congressional action, that is backed up by the whole weight of legal scholarship on this issue. And we could see how the justices began to dissect the absurdity of the United States position, that you would cross the border of my state in Washington and move to Idaho and you would lose your citizenship, that you would move from any one state that has participated in litigation and lose your rights and privileges that come with being an American citizen. It's an absurd argument, and we saw the justices start to unravel that today. We obviously have important work forward, and I'm really excited about the team effort here. And I'd love to turn it over to my colleague, AG Campbell from Massachusetts.
Thank you, AG Brown, and thank you, AG Tong, AG Platkin, and frankly, I'm really proud to be a part of this team. It is a team of, sadly, only Democratic AGs that are stepping up to protect the rule of law. All of us, I think, will say we were extremely grateful for the thoughtfulness of every justice, frankly, in this hearing, not only of the presentation by our team, but the questions that were asked. And what they made abundantly clear, I think, and I'm optimistic and hopeful, is that the importance of not only possibly taking a peek at the merits of this case, which we all agree and have firmly stood by, that this is not only unlawful action by the president, but that he does not have the power through an executive order to dismantle the 14th Amendment and especially birthright citizenship, which has been the law of the land for close to 150 years. What I also appreciated, though, by the posture of these folks and these justices and our team is that they recognize that when one baby is born in one state, that sometimes that baby will leave our respective states and go to another and receive the benefits and privileges in another state. And that it is really important that they look at the decisions of our lower courts, the thoughtfulness of the decisions of our lower courts, and recognize if they do not get this right, that we will be harmed as states, and that it is unpractical that this would be able to work, this unlawful action by the president. But I think what's most important is not just the limited argument today, is that everyone should care about this birthright citizenship issue. It is not just about the access to citizenship and the privileges afforded by citizenship. If they can dismantle the 14th Amendment in our Constitution, they could also dismantle the other rights and privileges afforded our residents. First Amendment, Second Amendment, you name it. So we stood up from day one protecting this, understanding that it is bigger than the birthright citizenship issue, while it's equally, of course, important that we care about it. And lastly, I will say why I'm proud of my colleagues is we recognize that while we do the work to protect the rule of law, we don't take our eyes off the issues that matter the most to the people of this country, which still is affordability and economics, and we're addressing those issues too, and I'm really proud of that. So I'm glad and proud to turn it over to A.G. Tong, but most importantly, glad to be a part of this team representing Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you. William Tong, Attorney General for the state of Connecticut. Really proud to stand as part of this coalition. And I just want to thank New Jersey, Jeremy Feigenbaum, for his incredible work today on behalf of all of us in the Supreme Court. For the last couple of hours, we talked about, we discussed, we debated really important legal questions, constitutional questions, but I just want to refocus on how personal this issue is. General Brown talked about how this is about the 14th Amendment and a provision of our Constitution, not just a statute, not just a law, the U.S. Constitution that enables and establishes that millions of Americans are Americans, that we are citizens. Me and my sisters. I don't derive my citizenship from my parents. I became the first American citizen in my immediate family by right of my birth on American soil in Hartford, Connecticut. And that is true today about millions upon millions of Americans, not just babies, not just children, not just people in Washington, New Jersey, Massachusetts that will soon be born and will become, we hope, because of what we did here today, Americans like all of us, but because the 14th Amendment establishes who we are, that this is the soul of our country, and it unlocks all of the possibilities that have enabled our lives, my life, your life, all of our lives to be possible. And so this is a really personal fight, and it's our fight to protect not just the 14th Amendment and immigrant families, but who we are as a country. Let me also just say, in reacting to the argument, Justice Sotomayor raised a really interesting point. How illegal is what the president has done, right, in trying to ban birthright citizenship? How utterly unlawful is it? Well, it's as if another president was elected and the very first day said, you know what? I don't care what the Second Amendment says. Doesn't matter. No American can possess firearms. Can you imagine if another president tried to do that in the very first hours of their new presidency? People would lose their minds. That's how utterly unconstitutional this action is on the merits. And that's why it's so important that we're here and fighting this battle on behalf of the American people today. Thank you.
Thank you, General Tong. By the way, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Matt Platkin, Attorney General of New Jersey. Happy to take some questions.
Attorney General, I have a quick question. Taylor Duesel, the Washington Examiner. I understand there's fundamental disagreement today on the 14th Amendment issue, but did you find that there is any semblance whatsoever of some bipartisan agreement about universal injunctions, nationwide injunctions? Because President Biden also had several of his policies stayed by universal injunctions. I'm just curious if you found that there was any sort of partial agreement on that there needs to be something done with universal injunctions at the local level.
Well, look, we've been consistent as states on this, I think, and you heard Solicitor General Feigenbaum say this. We have said for years that universal injunctions should be held to limited circumstances. But clearly those limited circumstances include a case where the president, with a Sharpie, rewrites the 14th Amendment and says overnight, in his first day in office, that the interpretation of the 14th Amendment, the plain text of it that has been in place for 157 years, that the Supreme Court has said the meaning of for 127 years, that the executive branch has adhered to for well over a century, is somehow different. And again, I live in New Jersey. I represent 9.5 million people. If you're a mother in South Jersey, very often they go to Philadelphia to give birth to their children. Are we really going to say that that child's citizenship turns on whether or not the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania, who did not join our suit, is in our suit? Come on, that's not the case. And clearly, this is a case that universal injunctions apply. I don't know if my colleagues have anything.
Part of the Trump administration's argument in this case was, that instead of universal injunctions, that the state should be going through class certifications, and even if that might take some time, they should be going through those legalistic steps, step by step. I wonder if you see any irony in the Trump administration kind of making an argument like that about how kind of processes will be followed no matter how much time it takes.
Well, there's a certain irony in saying we have to adhere to legal principles when they've utterly disregarded them. But Come on up, Jeremy. Here. But let's be clear, and they couldn't even concede the following. A justice asked the United States if, in fact, a circuit court said what you were doing was illegal, would you follow it? If the Supreme Court says what you were doing, will you follow it? He didn't say yes. Didn't say yes. So put aside their legalistic arguments of how they think somehow years from now people might be able to get relief. People are citizens when they're born here today. They're entitled to that relief today. States are harmed today if we do not get this relief. That's the point we're making. Anyone?
Yeah, sorry.
I just want to add, I think in addition to those arguments, I really appreciated Justice Jackson's frame as well. She brought out an additional element and an additional argument that's equally important, which suggested, frankly, that if one court, one of the lower courts, gave relief to only the named plaintiffs and said that the conduct of this administration in the context of birthright citizenship is unlawful, and to stop doing that conduct, that relief is granted to those named plaintiffs, and others are just sort of indirect beneficiaries possibly. But that frame is a powerful one, because I think at the end of the day, she gets at not only, obviously maybe not the other arguments that we've made in the case, but that this idea that they're just telling the government to stop doing something that is unlawful and that it's benefiting those plaintiffs, and to accept that. That's a powerful argument, and that I think alone, if she took her frame, is one that I hope all the other justices look at as an additional argument to rule in our favor.
I just want to underscore what General Platkin said. People are getting hurt right now. That's a really important point. Right? We can't wait. And this boiled down to Justice Kagan saying, but what if you're dead wrong and you're obviously wrong? And can we not take action when people are getting hurt? If a baby is born in Washington State, right, in the next hour, or in Connecticut, and they're denied citizenship, we're not there yet, but if they're denied citizenship, then what? Are they stateless? What are their parents supposed to do? Do they go underground? Can they get health care? Can they go to the emergency room? Should they sign a lease? Should they go to work? Right? All the decisions that parents, families have to make are thrown into chaos. And downstream of that, I mean, the immediate families, they're the ones getting hurt. The people that live in our states are getting hurt. But not too far downstream of that is, what are we supposed to do to take care of all those people? They're our responsibility. What are states supposed to do?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Do you think that the justices will explore a middle of the ground solution instead of just eliminating universal injunctions?
Well, I think you heard a lot of skepticism today to the argument about eliminating universal injunctions. And again, as I said, we've said for years that they should be reserved for limited circumstances, but this is clearly one of the circumstances that it applies to. Any other questions?
If the court ends up siding with the administration in this, will that hinder your efforts that are ongoing?
Ongoing with respect to birthright citizenship? Or?
Yes, as Attorney General, the lawsuits that you have put forward.
Yeah, well, look, in this case, as we laid out, if the court were to narrow the injunction just to the states in the suit, we would all be harmed. I mean, raise your hand if you haven't lived in more than one state. Babies are born, 6,000 babies are born outside of New Jersey and move into New Jersey every year. We'd have to be sitting there parsing through which state, which hospital those babies were born in, and whether or not they're entitled to benefits in our state. And more fundamentally, we'd be parsing through whether we're treating, for the first time since the United States Civil War, okay, 157 years, that we would have to sit there and say, are we going to treat babies differently as citizens or not, whether or not they were born in states that are part of this lawsuit? And that brings us back to some of the darkest days in this nation's history.
The only thing I would add on top of that is, in addition to thousands of babies potentially losing their American citizenship, you're going to have a class of children born in this country that may not have a citizenship of any country. And there was questions by the justices brought out today talking about how other countries only afford citizenship if you're born in their country. So you're going to have people that not only lose the rights and benefits and privileges and honor of being an American, but they have no benefits whatsoever. It might be stateless. What do we do with those children? How do we address the problems that they are facing? So not only do we think that we need to prevail to ensure what it means to an American, but protect the rights of all the children that are born here to not deal with the complete lawlessness that might come from this presidential action.
And just to add on to my colleagues, an additional harm if the court gets this wrong is we would require those unborn babies and their families to somehow now access the courts on their own. And I think Justice Kagan said this well, if they couldn't afford a lawyer or if they couldn't afford someone to help them through that process, well, good luck. It's difficult for them to get any type of relief, which I was really hopeful to hear, not only the questions around that, but the practicality and the harm that would cause states and individuals who would want to seek some type of relief, but who wouldn't be able to. Oh, sorry.
I want to thank you all, and I just want to note, this suit, again, I'm just so proud of my colleagues who are here and the other, do the math, 18? And I have to say, Attorney General Rob Bonta was trying to be here and he had some flight challenges, so I want to thank California as well for their leadership. We're proud to stand up for the rule of law. And what we saw in there is the rule of law working. 9 justices asking tough questions, people responding to them. We may have differences of opinion, but that's how the law is supposed to work. And I hope that this administration, when this decision comes down and when other decisions come down that affect the unlawful actions that they've taken, that we collectively, the reason why you're getting so many injunctions issues because they're violating the law at unprecedented rates. I hope that they stop saber rattling about whether they'll in fact follow those orders and start following the law. That is what this country is based on. The 14th Amendment is a prime example of that. You do not get to rewrite it with a Sharpie. You have to follow the law. Thank you all.